All right, let's dive into the yellow wallpaper, huh? We'll be using the full text on Project Gutenberg and, oh, and of course, a little help from Wikipedia. Get ready for a journey into madness and some really fascinating symbolism. It's a story about women's lives back in the late 19th century.
It really is, yeah. And it's a story that still resonates, surprisingly, today.
Yeah, let's get into it. So the story starts with our main character, the narrator. She's a young mother
Yeah.
and dealing with, as her husband puts it, a temporary nervous depression, which, by the way, her husband is also her physician.
Right, right.
He's named John. And he prescribes this rest cure, which sounds, I don't know about you, but it sounds more like a punishment to me.
Well, it was a popular treatment at the time, but Gilman, she uses the story to really kind of critique that whole idea of the rest cure
Yeah.
and how effective it really was.
And whether it's even, helpful at all.
Exactly. So John rents this mansion, beautiful, secluded mansion. Yeah. And he basically confines his wife to this upstairs nursery. The
Mhm.
narrator, she tries at first, to make the best of it, find some beauty in her surroundings. But the room itself, it just starts to feel really oppressive.
Oh, yeah. Right from the start, there are these hints that something's a little off, right?
Yeah.
Like the mansion is strangely cheap, and nobody's lived there for years.
Mm-hmm.
And then that nursery, wow, with the torn wallpaper, the bars on the windows, even the beds bolted to the floor.
Yeah.
As a listener, what do you think? What were your first impressions of that setting?
I think Gilman really creates the sense of unease. Even those little details like
Hmm.
the rings in the wall, the nailed down furniture. When you think about, her being confined, it all just takes on this really sinister quality, almost like the room itself is like a reflection of her mental state,
Oh, yeah,
kind of deteriorating as she becomes more isolated.
right. And that's where I think the genius of using an unreliable narrator really comes in. Because we're seeing this story through her journal entries. So we're right there with her thoughts, her perceptions, even as they, become more strange. Like remember at the beginning how she tries to say that the disturbing parts of the nursery
Yeah.
are just from, kids who lived there before. But as we read on, it becomes so clear that those are signs of
Yeah.
her own imprisonment.
Exactly. Exactly. Gilman really blurs the lines between reality and what's in her mind.
Hmm.
So we're left wondering what is really happening,
Right.
and what's just a product of her mental state deteriorating.
And then there's the wallpaper itself. It's not just background, is it?
Yeah.
It's like its own character in the story.
Absolutely.
The narrator gets so fixated on it, the intricate patterns, that smoldering, unclean yellow. She even talks about a hidden pattern, a sub-pattern, that she only sees in a certain light. Like the wallpaper holds some kind of secret meaning.
It's the most potent symbol in the story, I think. When you think about it, what does it represent to you?
Well, to the narrator, it definitely becomes this manifestation of her confinement, of the societal pressures that are just suffocating her.
It makes perfect sense, especially considering the time period. Women back then were so often just relegated to the domestic sphere, and their lives were controlled by husbands and doctors. Their voices, they were silenced, their concerns dismissed as hysteria.
Right, right.
So the story takes on this whole deeper meaning.
Yeah.
The wallpaper, it becomes a symbol of that patriarchal society that traps women in these, predetermined roles.
Right.
And the narrator's, her descent into madness, you can see that as a kind of rebellion
Oh, wow.
against those constraints, this desperate attempt to break free from the patterns that bind her.
That is, wow, that adds a whole new layer to it. I'm starting to understand why the yellow wallpaper is considered such an important piece of feminist literature.
Absolutely, absolutely. Gilman was so ahead of her time exploring those themes and giving a voice to women who were, marginalized and silenced.
And she does it in a way that it's subtle, but it's really unsettling. So let's talk about how the narrator's perception of the wallpaper, how that changes over time. It gets more and more sinister. She starts to see it as bars at night. And then she sees a woman trapped behind the pattern, like shaking it, trying to escape.
That's where it gets really interesting because the wallpaper starts to kind of reflect her own feelings,
Yeah.
her own sense of being trapped, almost as if like the pattern itself is mirroring her internal struggles, her desire for freedom. It's really striking that the woman she sees, trapped in the wallpaper, she becomes like a double, representing that part of herself that she's trying to suppress.
Almost like she's projecting her own her own sense of imprisonment onto the wallpaper. And
And
seeing herself in that trapped woman.
that's a great observation. The line between the narrator and the woman in the wallpaper, it becomes so blurred. It's such a brilliant literary device. Gilman is able to explore, those psychological effects of confinement and those societal pressures.
I'm hooked. What happens next? How does she react to seeing this trapped woman?
Well, that's where we'll pick up in the next part of our deep dive. But before we get there, let's just pause for a moment and think about, the significance of this transformation. The narrator's obsession with the wallpaper, her identification with that trapped woman, it all points to this growing sense of desperation, this yearning for something more than the limited life she's been allowed.
That's a powerful image, and it really resonates even today. So we'll be back after a quick message with more of this incredible story, so don't go anywhere. Okay, so we're back, and still thinking about the yellow wallpaper. Last we left off our narrator, she was starting to see a woman trapped behind the patterns of the wallpaper. Such a powerful image, really reflects how trapped she feels herself.
It is, yeah. It's a real turning point in the story. I mean, she goes from just looking at the wallpaper to really trying to figure it out. Like it has some hidden meaning.
Yeah, and she's doing all this in secret, right? John, her husband, he just dismisses her concerns about the wallpaper. Like it's just part of her nervous condition. And he even tells her not to work, not to write. Like it's going to be too much for her. It's almost like he's, I don't know, trying to control her mind.
Yeah, that's a big part of it, John's insistence on this rest cure. His constant, watching everything she does. It all shows how much control he has over her.
It's so frustrating. He's totally invalidating her, even though she's clearly getting worse. And her sister-in-law, Jenny, she's the only other woman around.
Yeah.
But even she doesn't really get it.
Yeah, Jenny's interesting. She's like, she represents those women who just accept what society tells them. She's happy being a housewife, doesn't really see the downsides to it.
Right. So it's like our narrator, she's surrounded by people who are totally blind to how trapped she is. It's like they can't see the bars of her cage.
Right.
And the wallpaper, it becomes the one thing she can confide in, the only thing that sees her true feelings.
Exactly. And her obsession with it just keeps growing. Now she's seeing the trapped woman everywhere, like in the garden, behind trees. It's not just about the room anymore. It's this symbol that's like taking over her whole life.
Mm-hmm. That's such a haunting image. What do you think is happening to her at this point? Like, is she really losing it? Or is she, I don't know, maybe seeing things more clearly than everyone else?
That's the thing with Gilman's writing. She leaves it open. You could see it as her completely breaking down, going mad. But you could also see it as her waking up in a way, rejecting everything she's supposed to be.
Right, right.
And remember, she doesn't even have a name, the narrator. So she's like any woman could be her,
That's a really good point. It makes the story, well, it makes it even more powerful, I think. So how does it all end? What's the climax of the story?
Well, the tension just keeps building. She gets more and more obsessed with the wallpaper and with wanting to free that woman she sees trapped. So she starts peeling off the wallpaper at night when John's asleep. And she talks about it like they're doing it together, her and the trapped woman tearing down the bars of their prison.
Wow. It's like this act of rebellion. She's finally taking control,
Exactly. But it's also dangerous,
Yeah.
Remember, John told her not to work, not to write. Like, it's too much for her. So when she tears down the wallpaper, she's not just disobeying him, she's challenging his whole authority, their whole relationship even.
And that leads to that incredible last scene. John comes home and finds her, well, she's lost it completely, creeping around the room, saying she's finally free.
Yeah, and the way he reacts, it's really something. He faints right there. Like, he can't handle it. It's like he never saw her as a real person with her own thoughts and feelings. He was so focused on controlling her, keeping her safe, that he completely missed who she really was.
It's like his fainting, it symbolizes how he's lost all control. He can't keep her down anymore.
Right, exactly. And then we're left with this image. She's still circling the room, stepping over him like he's not even there. She's escaped the wallpaper, but what did it cost her?
Yeah, it's chilling. And kind of ambiguous. You're left wondering what it all means. But before we get into that, we need to take a quick break. We'll be right back with our final thoughts on the yellow wallpaper. Okay, we're back. And I gotta say, that ending on the yellow wallpaper really left me thinking it's both, I don't know, triumphant and kind of sad at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, it really makes you wonder, what does freedom really mean for her, you know? Has she actually broken free, or has she completely lost herself in the process?
Yeah, it's like by tearing down that wallpaper, she's not just freeing the woman behind it, but she's also kind of becoming her. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And remember, John's lying there, helpless, the very person who represents like all the forces that were holding her back. And she's literally stepping over him like he's nothing to her anymore.
It's a powerful image, isn't it? Like she's finally rejecting his control completely.
Totally. It's like a complete reversal of power.
It's amazing to think this story was written over 100 years ago, but it still feels so relevant today. What do you think makes the yellow wallpaper so timeless?
Hmm. I think it speaks to this basic human need, you know, to be free, to be your own person. We all feel that pressure sometimes to conform, to fit in, whether it's from society, family, or even just ourselves. That feeling of being trapped, wanting to break out, it's universal, you know?
That's so true. And the way Gilman uses the wallpaper as a symbol, it's brilliant. It represents all those invisible forces that can hold us back.
Right, it's not just about the actual wallpaper. It's
Yeah.
it's about the expectations, the beliefs, the things that limit us, even if we don't realize it.
And the fact that the narrator doesn't have a name, it makes it even more, I don't know, relatable. Like it could be any of us struggling to break free.
Yeah.
What do you think about that as a listener? Have you ever felt that way? Like you're trapped wanting to tear down the walls around you?
It's a reminder, I think, that even when things seem really hard, there's always this part of us that wants more, that wants to be free. But we also have to be careful not to trap ourselves, or even worse, trap other people without even realizing it.
That's a really good point. It makes me think about how we can all, you know, question those expectations, those things that try to define us and fight for our own freedom and the freedom of others.
Absolutely. It's a call to action, you know? Don't just accept things as they are, question them, challenge them.
This has been a really amazing deep dive. The Yellow Wallpaper is definitely a story that'll stick with me.
It really is. It's one of those stories that, you know, it stays with you, makes you think, and it deserves to be read and talked about for a long time to come.
So to our listeners, we encourage you, keep thinking about this story. What does it mean to you? What would a modern yellow wallpaper look like? What are the walls that we need to tear down today? We'd love to hear your thoughts, and until next time, keep diving deep.